Do you want to learn how to train a top 1% inside sales agent for your real estate business? In this video, I'm going to share with you the most effective way to train an inside sales agent to call your leads, follow up with them, and schedule you appointments with ready now home buyers and sellers. So this is the second video in a series of 3 where I show you the whole process to first hire and then train and then manage an inside sales agent for your real estate business. So if you've watched my previous video on how to hire an inside sales agent and now you have someone ready to go to work, then watch this video next because I'm going to give you everything that they need to do the job effectively. Now, if you don't have an ISA yet, then you have to go back and watch my previous video called How to Hire a Top 1% ISA, because in that video, I show you my company, Evolved Agents' unique strategy for finding and recruiting top 1% talent of all ISAs and virtual assistants. And we're qualified to teach this stuff because we've now hired, trained, managed, and placed hundreds of ISAs with the real estate agents that we work with, and our agents have gotten incredible results from working with their ISAs. And our company has now spent over $200,000 on our ISA team. So we believe in this stuff and we know it really works if it's done properly. Having an ISA will provide you with massive leverage inside of your real estate business and allow you to enjoy the finer things in life. So let's dig into it. Here is how to turn any ISA into a top 1% ISA through training. The first thing you want to consider is that person's level of training. So obviously someone who has past experience working in a brokerage as a real estate ISA, they're going to have an easier time in training than someone with no ISA experience. Now, that being said, here at our company, Evolved Agents, all of our ISAs go through the exact same training, regardless of their previous experience. There's no taking shortcuts just because you think you know everything already. Now, if you remember my last video on training, then having experience on the phone as some sort of telemarketer or cold caller or ISA, something of that nature, that is required because we want to be sure this person has already built up those soft skills, right? Resiliency, thick skin, being self-motivated, being able to work long hours on the phone and the computer. Those skills are very important to have. Now, they don't necessarily need the real estate experience because we're going to teach them all those things, those technical skills, those specific things within our training. So this training is really for all aspiring ISAs, regardless of their past experience. There's 5 parts of our ISA training: terms and definitions, call requirements, scripts and role play, systems training, and then live calls. Now let's break down these 5 key parts of our ISA training together, starting with terms and definitions. Being acquainted with common real estate terms is obviously very important when you're having conversations about real estate. Even though your ISA isn't from America, they should sound like a very well-educated member of your team. Now, there are certain things that an unlicensed assistant can and can't say on the phone, which differs a little bit by each state, but the basics are always the same. They can't talk about certain specific details of the property, they can't talk about interest rates, etc. So it's mostly a generalized knowledge of real estate that your ISA is going to need to do the job. Things like what's a lender, right? What are the 4 parts of a home loan? Now, what are interest rates? What's a foreclosure, escrow, short sale? What's the home buying and selling process like, etc. Once your ISA has an understanding for the real estate industry and the terms involved, it's time to move on to the second part of our ISA training, which is called call requirements. Here, we're basically explaining at a high level what to say on each call and how to say it. So we begin by explaining to the ISA the 7 pillars to any call, which is basically the skeleton of the script. For buyers, there are 7 pillar questions which must be asked on each call to qualify that person properly. So the first one is criteria. What kind of home does this person want? Next is areas of interest. Where specifically do they want to move? And then are they committed to an agent? And if they are, have they actually signed anything? Number 4 is timeline to move. Number 5 is their motivation for moving. Number 6 is their price point or their budget. Number 7 is, are they working with a lender and have they been pre-approved for that amount? Now for sellers, there are 6 pillar questions that need to be answered on the call: house description, motivation, timeline, are they committed to an agent, price point, and address. So those key pillar questions are really the skeleton of a good script. And we want your ISA to get a good understanding of these and know why we're asking them in the first place. So make sure your ISA knows the importance of asking those pillar questions on every single one of the calls. It's important because we need to understand and diagnose that lead's current situation and then their desired situation. And that's how we place you in the middle so we can make the sale and really help them out. The next thing we teach in call requirements, which again is in the second part of this training, are the QA or quality assurance behaviors. There are 10 things that we listen for in order to tell a good call from a bad one. So it's basically an objective scale we use to grade each of your ISA's calls, and they need to understand the stuff too so they know how to improve. Those 10 QA behaviors are: number 1, tone of voice. So we want to mirror and match the lead's tone and energy on the phone when we're talking to them. Number 2, follow-up script. So we always want to ask those 7 pillar questions we just spoke about before setting up an appointment. Number 3, rapport and empathy. So that's finding common ground with the lead. Number 4 is active listening. So paying attention to all the details on the call and then including those details on your notes. Number 5 is targeted questions. So they're like follow-up questions or probing questions that would follow after you receive a response. Number 6 is targeted solutions. So putting that lead's doubts and concerns at ease based on what you, the realtor, offers, any special programs, stuff like that. Number 7, objections. So handling roadblocks that inevitably come up on every call. Number 8 is power phrases, which add life to the conversation. Number 9 is agent info. So that's sharing information that's specific to you, the agent, and also adds value for the lead to work with you specifically. And number 10, sounding convinced. Did that lead sound convinced? Did they actively participate in the conversation or just say yes to the appointment to get that ISA off the phone, which would be an auto fail. Next, we want to be sure those 10 QA behaviors really sink in, your ISA understands them. So we recommend having your ISA listen to past recordings and then grade them based on those 10 QA behaviors. Because your ISA will never be able to improve if they can't tell a good call from a bad one. Now, at this point in training, before we dive into the real hard stuff in part 3, we like to liven things up with our group of ISAs in training and have some fun. So now we'll play a round or 2 of Jeopardy, which really helps cement the things in that they've learned so far, which are the real estate terms and definitions, those pillar questions, and the QA behaviors. Now, part 3 of training is where things start to get interesting. This is where we usually start to find out who's cut out to make a great ISA and who isn't. Part 3 of training is called scripts and roleplay. So we'll begin by breaking up the script into its core 3 parts: the intro, the body, and the close. Intro: who you are, where you're calling from, and why you're calling. The body are those 7 pillar questions we talked about earlier. So we go over different ways of asking those questions. And then the close. So you want to provide value to that lead based on their specific situation and then set up the next steps, which is usually either a live transfer call directly to the agent or a booked appointment for them. And you want to explain to that lead what's in it for them. Why should they show up and why should they care? And then after they get a good understanding of the whole script, we'll go over some common objections and how to bounce them. Usually a good way to teach them the objection handling is to listen to past calls and highlight the things that probably should or shouldn't have been said. Next, we'll review agent information. So all the information that ISA will need that's unique to the agent who they'll be calling for. Things like the agent's name and contact info, name of their brokerage, price points in their current market on the low and high end, years of experience, lender's contact information, area knowledge, like where specifically, which markets you work in, cities, towns, counties, and then significant landmarks in those areas so they can relate to the lead. And then an important one, which helps build value with the lead for working with you, would be any special programs that you, the agent, or your lender offers. Things like a first-time homebuyers program, credit repair, down payment assistance, free staging or moving. We even have an agent in San Diego that offers free helicopter rides on closing, etc. Now, after the script and the agent information training is complete, we'll dive into some role plays. So we'll take turns being either the ISA or the lead and get some practice having a conversation. We'll start off with some easy situations with no objections and then slowly add in tougher and tougher questions and objections as the ISA gets more comfortable. Next is the 4th part of training, which is called systems training. And there's basically 2 kinds of software almost every ISA is going to be using for work: a CRM and a dialer. And sometimes the CRM has the dialer in it, which makes it even better. So first, give your ISA the logins that they're going to need. Next, show them how to use your softwares, the CRM and the dialer. And ideally, you create SOPs or standard operating procedures for them to follow. Those SOPs ideally should be both recorded and then written out step by step, so you have them forever. Your ISA will never forget how to do the job. And then you can pass those on to additional team members in the future if needed. Then you want to show your ISA your unique process for managing your contacts in your database. So that's your system for tagging and staging leads based on where they're at in your sales pipeline. For example, here in our CRM, Follow Up Boss, we have different buckets where we put the lead in based on where they're at in our sales process and how that last conversation went with them. Then you want to show your ISA how to answer any inbound texts and emails that you receive from the leads. Next, on the dialer, obviously your ISA has to know how to make outbound calls and also live transfer the hot leads to you. Last part of the systems training, we teach the ISA how often to contact each lead. The amount of times you attempt to call each lead really depends on how many leads you have. But at a bare minimum, you should at least be calling each lead 5 times over the first 3 days. If you don't have many leads, then you can afford to call each person more because you have more time on your hands, right? But if you already have a lot of leads, a big database, then you really have to prioritize the first few calls to the new leads because that's when most people pick up the phone. So that's systems training. Now, the 5th and final part of our world-class ISA training are doing live calls. Now it's time to apply everything your ISA has learned in training and get some practice calling real leads. And this is the best way to learn anything, right? Get some experience by actually doing it. You should listen in live while your ISA makes their first few calls, and then that way you can give them instant feedback. And even after they're starting to sound good, you should still listen to a few of their calls every single day, especially at the beginning. Use those QA behaviors we talked about to grade their calls, and then provide them with more feedback. Feedback is a gift. And even once your ISA starts sounding real great on the phones consistently, it doesn't end there. We want to give them some specific goals to hit, keep them accountable for hitting those goals, and then make sure they continue to improve their skills and performance over time. And we'll talk about that more on the next video called Managing Your Top 1% ISA. I'll see you in that next video right now.